The morning sun cast long shadows across the immaculate gardens of Kensington Palace. Inside the grand entrance hall, Princess Kate stood near the marble staircase, adjusting the collar of her youngest son's navy blue coat. Prince Louis, now 5 years old, fidgeted with excitement as his mother smoothed down his unruly brown hair. The young prince had been looking forward to this day for weeks. Today was the annual Royal Garden Party, an event where members of the royal family mingled with distinguished guests from across the Commonwealth. Kate smiled warmly at her son, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Louis had inherited his father's mischievous grin and her own sense of curiosity. He bounced on his toes, asking endless questions about who would be attending and whether there would be cake. Kate answered each question patiently, her gentle voice echoing softly in the vast hallway. The relationship between mother and son was evident in every glance and gesture. She had always been a hands-on parent, despite the demands of royal duties, and Louis adored her completely. Outside, the palace grounds buzzed with activity. Staff members hurried back and forth, making final preparations for the afternoon event. White tents had been erected on the pristine lawns, and tables were being set with fine china and silver. Security personnel conducted their final sweeps, checking credentials and ensuring every detail met protocol. Among them was Captain Thomas Sterling, a veteran member of the Royal Guard who had served the family for nearly 15 years. His sharp eyes missed nothing, and his dedication to protecting the royal family was unwavering. As the morning progressed, other members of the royal family began arriving at Kensington Palace. Prince William had left early for a private meeting, but would return before the event commenced. Princess Charlotte and Prince George had been taken to visit their great-grandmother earlier in the week and were staying at another royal residence for the weekend. This meant Kate would be managing Louis on her own during the preliminary gatherings, something she had done countless times before without issue. Around 11 o'clock, a sleek black vehicle pulled through the palace gates. Queen Camilla emerged from the car, dressed impeccably in a pale blue ensemble with matching hat. Her appearance had been scheduled, as she was meant to attend the garden party alongside other senior royals. However, her arrival time was earlier than expected. The staff greeted her with customary bows and curtsies as she made her way toward the main entrance, her heels clicking purposefully against the stone pathway. Kate was in the drawing room when she heard the commotion of Camilla's arrival. She glanced at Louis, who was playing quietly with a toy soldier on the Persian rug. Taking his hand, she led him toward the entrance hall to offer proper greetings. It was important to maintain family harmony, especially during public events. Despite the complex history between various family members, Kate had always conducted herself with grace and diplomacy, choosing peace over conflict whenever possible. Camilla entered the drawing room moments later, her expression pleasant but difficult to read. She acknowledged Kate with a brief nod before her gaze settled on Louis. The young prince looked up at his step-grandmother with wide, curious eyes. Camilla approached him with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She began speaking to Louis in a tone that seemed overly sweet, asking him questions about his activities and commenting on how much he had grown since their last meeting. Kate watched the interaction carefully, maintaining her composure. Something felt different about Camilla's demeanor today, though she couldn't quite identify what it was. The queen consort seemed more interested in Louis than usual, her attention focused entirely on the child rather than engaging in the typical adult conversation that usually accompanied such visits. Kate dismissed her unease, reminding herself that family members naturally took interest in the children. After several minutes of conversation, Camilla suggested that Louis might enjoy seeing the preparations outside. Kate agreed, thinking it would be good for her energetic son to get some fresh air before the formal event. The three of them walked toward the terrace doors, with Louis skipping ahead excitedly. The gardens looked magnificent, with flowers in full bloom and the white tents gleaming in the sunshine. Louis pointed at everything, his enthusiasm infectious. As they stood on the terrace, Camilla mentioned that she had brought a special gift for Louis in her car. She suggested perhaps Louis could accompany her to retrieve it, as it was too large for her to carry alone. The request seemed innocent enough on the surface, but something in Camilla's tone made Kate pause. She felt a flutter of maternal instinct, a protective feeling that every mother knows when something doesn't feel quite right. Kate politely declined, suggesting instead that a staff member could retrieve the gift and bring it inside. Camilla's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. She insisted it would only take a moment, and that Louis would enjoy the small adventure of fetching his own surprise. The young prince looked up at his mother with hopeful eyes, clearly excited about the prospect of a gift. Kate felt torn between not wanting to cause offense and trusting her instincts. Before Kate could respond definitively, Camilla reached out and took Louis's hand, beginning to lead him toward the steps that descended into the garden. The gesture was swift and presumptuous, bypassing Kate's authority entirely. Kate stepped forward immediately, her voice remaining calm but firm as she called for Louis to stay with her. The young prince stopped, confused by the sudden tension he could sense between the adults. Camilla turned back, her expression shifting to one of mild annoyance masked by forced pleasantness. She commented that Kate was being overprotective, that it was just a short walk to the car, and that surely the Princess of Wales could trust her with her own step-grandson for 5 minutes. The words carried an edge that hadn't been there moments before. Kate recognized the subtle challenge in Camilla's tone, the implication that refusing would be seen as distrust or disrespect. Kate maintained her ground, moving closer to Louis and gently taking his other hand. She explained in measured tones that she preferred to accompany them both, as she wouldn't want Louis to miss any of the garden party preparations. Her voice remained respectful, but left no room for argument. This was her child, and she would not be maneuvered into allowing Louis to be taken anywhere without her presence. Regardless of who was doing the asking, the atmosphere on the terrace grew noticeably tense. Camilla's pleasant facade began to crack slightly as she realized Kate would not be persuaded. She made another attempt, this time with more insistence, suggesting that Kate's hovering was unnecessary and that she was creating an awkward situation over nothing. Other staff members in the vicinity began to notice the exchange, their activity slowing as they sensed the brewing conflict between the two royal women. Kate felt her heart rate increase, but kept her expression serene. She had spent years learning to navigate difficult situations with poise, and she would not lose her composure now. She reiterated her position, making it clear that Louis would be staying with her. Louis himself began to pick up on the strange tension, his earlier excitement fading into uncertainty. He pressed closer to his mother's side, seeking comfort from the one person who had always made him feel safe. What happened next would change the dynamic between the family members forever. Camilla, seemingly abandoning all pretense of pleasantness, reached forward and grasped Louis's arm with both hands. Her grip was firm, more forceful than appropriate for a gentle interaction with a child. She attempted to pull the young prince away from Kate, her actions betraying a determination that shocked everyone present. Kate immediately tightened her hold on her son, her maternal instincts overriding all concerns about protocol or family politics. Louis cried out in confusion and fear, not understanding why his step-grandmother was pulling him so insistently. His small voice calling "Mummy" pierced the air, drawing immediate attention from everyone in the vicinity. Kate wrapped her arms protectively around her son, refusing to let go, while maintaining as much dignity as possible in the increasingly distressing situation. She called out firmly for Camilla to release Louis immediately, her voice carrying the authority of both a mother and a princess. Captain Sterling, who had been conducting a security check near the east wing, heard the commotion and immediately moved toward the terrace. His training kicked in instantly, his mind rapidly assessing the situation as he approached. What he witnessed stopped him in his tracks for only a fraction of a second before professional duty propelled him forward. The queen consort was physically attempting to remove a child from his mother's arms, against the mother's clear wishes. Protocol and hierarchy suddenly meant nothing compared to the immediate welfare of the young prince. Captain Sterling moved with practiced efficiency across the terrace, his boots making sharp sounds against the stone as he approached the unfolding scene. His presence immediately commanded attention, and several other security personnel began converging on the location as well, alerted by his rapid response. The captain positioned himself strategically between Camilla and the garden steps, effectively blocking any potential path away from the palace with Louis. His expression remained professionally neutral, but his eyes were alert and assessing every detail of the situation. Kate felt a wave of relief as the security officer arrived. Though she maintained her protective hold on Louis, the young prince had begun crying in earnest now. Frightened by the strange tug-of-war and the raised voices around him, Kate spoke softly to him, trying to soothe his fears while keeping her attention on Camilla, who had finally released her grip on the child's arm but remained uncomfortably close. The queen consort's face had flushed with anger and embarrassment at the intervention, her carefully maintained composure crumbling in the face of being directly challenged. "Captain." Sterling addressed Camilla with utmost respect but unmistakable firmness. He inquired about her intentions and expressed concern about the distress being caused to the young prince. His words were carefully chosen to maintain protocol while making it absolutely clear that his primary duty was to protect members of the royal family from any threat, regardless of its source. Camilla drew herself up indignantly, clearly unused to being questioned by security staff. She insisted there was no issue and that her actions were being misinterpreted, blown out of proportion. Kate seized the moment to take Louis back inside, away from the confrontation and prying eyes of staff members who had gathered at a respectful distance. She whispered reassurances to her son as they moved toward the drawing room, her arms wrapped securely around his small, trembling body. Louis buried his face against her shoulder, his tears dampening the fabric of her elegant dress. Kate's primary concern was calming her frightened child, though her mind raced with questions about what had just transpired and why Camilla had behaved so inappropriately. Once inside the drawing room, Kate settled onto a sofa with Louis in her lap. She gently wiped his tears and spoke to him in soothing tones, explaining that everything was all right now and that he was safe. The resilience of childhood began to show as Louis's sobs gradually subsided into occasional hiccups. He asked his mother why grandmother Camilla had pulled him so hard, and Kate struggled to find an appropriate answer that would neither frighten him further nor require her to disparage a family member. She settled for explaining that sometimes adults make mistakes too. Outside, Captain Sterling maintained his position on the terrace. Camilla attempted to dismiss him, insisting she wished to speak with Kate privately and that his presence was unnecessary. The captain respectfully but firmly refused to leave until the situation was completely resolved and all parties were calm. He suggested that perhaps it would be best if Camilla returned to her vehicle and that the scheduled garden party could proceed as planned later in the afternoon. His suggestion carried the weight of a security directive rather than a mere recommendation. The tension remained palpable as additional senior members of the royal household staff arrived, including the palace's senior private secretary. The unfolding incident required immediate management to prevent it from becoming a larger scandal. Discreet conversations began taking place in hushed tones, with staff members trying to understand exactly what had occurred and how best to handle the delicate situation. The presence of multiple witnesses meant the event could not simply be swept under the carpet or dismissed as a misunderstanding. Camilla found herself in an increasingly untenable position. Her actions had been witnessed by numerous staff members and security personnel, all of whom were bound by duty to report accurately on events that occurred within the palace grounds. She could not credibly claim that nothing inappropriate had happened when a child had been crying and a princess had been visibly distressed. Her attempts to frame the situation as a simple misunderstanding were met with polite but skeptical silence from those present. Inside the drawing room, Kate heard footsteps approaching and looked up to see the private secretary entering. He approached with visible concern, inquiring about Louis's well-being and whether Kate wished for a physician to examine the child. Kate declined, explaining that Louis was physically unharmed but had been badly frightened. The secretary nodded gravely and informed her that Captain Sterling had secured the situation outside and that Camilla was being encouraged to depart the premises until matters could be discussed more formally. Louis had begun to recover his spirits somewhat, though he remained unusually clingy to his mother. Kate stroked his hair absently while discussing the situation with the private secretary. She made it clear that she did not wish to escalate matters unnecessarily, but that she needed assurance that such an incident would never occur again. The protection of her children was non-negotiable, and anyone who could not respect that boundary regardless of their position, would not have unsupervised access to them going forward. The private secretary assured Kate that her concerns would be conveyed to the appropriate parties and that a full report would be prepared for Prince William's review. He also suggested that perhaps the garden party should be postponed, given the morning's events. Kate considered this briefly, but decided against it. Canceling would only generate more questions and speculation. Instead, she proposed proceeding as planned, but with the understanding that she and Louis would make only a brief appearance before retiring. The secretary agreed this was a sensible compromise. Back on the terrace, Camilla had been escorted to her vehicle by Captain Sterling and another senior guard. Her departure was handled with all the respect due her position, but there was no mistaking the firmness with which she was being removed from the situation. She maintained a stony expression as she entered the car, her earlier anger now replaced by what appeared to be wounded pride. The vehicle pulled away from Kensington Palace shortly after noon, nearly 2 hours before the garden party was scheduled to begin. Staff members began dispersing back to their duties. Though the morning's events would undoubtedly be the subject of much private discussion in the coming days, Captain Sterling returned inside to check on Kate and Louis, wanting to ensure the young prince had recovered from his ordeal. Kate thanked him sincerely for his intervention, acknowledging that the situation could have escalated further without his professional handling. The captain accepted her gratitude with characteristic modesty, reminding her that protecting the family was precisely what he was there to do. Prince William arrived back at Kensington Palace around 1 o'clock, immediately sensing that something was amiss. Staff members directed him to the drawing room where he found Kate still comforting Louis, though the young prince had mostly recovered and was now playing quietly with his toys again. Kate's expression told William everything he needed to know before she even began explaining what had transpired. His face darkened as he listened to the account, his protective instincts as both a father and a husband fully engaged. William's immediate concern was for his son's emotional state. He sat on the floor beside Louis, gauging the boy in conversation about his toys and gently assessing whether the incident had caused any lasting distress. Louis seemed resilient, the way children often are, already bouncing back from the scary experience now that he was safe with both parents. However, William knew that the situation required serious attention. This was not a minor breach of etiquette, but a fundamental violation of parental authority and child safety. Kate provided William with a detailed account of everything that had occurred, from Camilla's unusually early arrival to her insistence on taking Louis alone to her car, and finally the physical attempt to remove the child from Kate's arms. William listened intently, his jaw tightening as he processed the information. He asked several clarifying questions, ensuring he understood the full sequence of events. Kate also mentioned Captain Sterling's swift and professional intervention, which had prevented the situation from deteriorating further. The private secretary arrived shortly after to brief William officially on the incident and the steps that had been taken. He presented a preliminary written report compiled from statements given by the security personnel and staff members who had witnessed the events. William read through it carefully, his expression growing increasingly serious. The consistency of the accounts left no room for ambiguity about what had happened. This was not a case of misunderstanding or miscommunication, rather a clear case of inappropriate behavior. William made several immediate decisions. First, he confirmed that Camilla would not be attending the garden party and that her absence would be attributed to a scheduling conflict rather than the morning's incident. Second, he instructed that Louis should not be pressured to attend the event if he did not feel comfortable doing so. Third, he requested a private meeting with his father, the king, to discuss the matter at the earliest possible opportunity. This situation involved the monarch's wife and could not be handled through normal channels alone. Kate appreciated William's decisive response, but also expressed concern about causing a major rift within the family. She had never sought conflict with Camilla and had always tried to maintain civil relations for the sake of family harmony. However, William was adamant that protecting their children came before any political or familial considerations. If Camilla could not respect basic boundaries regarding their children, then those boundaries would need to be enforced through more formal means. As the afternoon approached, Kate and William decided that they would attend the garden party briefly as planned, demonstrating that they would not be intimidated or driven from their duties by the morning's events. Louis, showing remarkable resilience, declared that he wanted to attend as well, especially since he had been promised cake. His parents agreed, proud of their son's courage while remaining vigilant about his emotional state throughout the event. The garden party proceeded with all the expected formality and grace, though those who knew the family well might have noticed a certain tension in Kate's smile and an extra protectiveness in how William kept Louis close throughout the event. Captain Sterling and his team maintained an even more vigilant watch than usual, though their increased attention was subtle enough that most guests never noticed. The afternoon passed without incident. Gradually, the normalcy of the event helped ease the tension that had built up during the morning. As evening fell and guests departed, the family retreated to their private quarters. Louis was tired but happy, his earlier trauma seemingly forgotten in the excitement of the party and the consumption of several pieces of cake. Kate and William tucked him into bed together, both relieved that their son seemed to have emerged from the experience without lasting harm. However, they both knew that the real challenges lay ahead in addressing the situation with the broader family and ensuring such an incident never occurred again. Following morning brought no relief from the weight of the previous day's events. William woke early, his mind already occupied with the difficult conversation he would need to have with his father. A meeting had been arranged for 10 o'clock at Clarence's house, and William knew it would be one of the most challenging discussions he had ever had with the king. Situation involved not just family, politics, but fundamental questions about the safety and well-being of his children, issues on which he would not and could not compromise. Kate spent the morning with Louis and his siblings, who had returned to Kensington Palace overnight. She had decided not to share details of the incident with Charlotte and George, seeing no need to worry them unnecessarily. However, she did pay extra attention to Louis, watching for any signs of delayed stress or anxiety from the previous day's events. The young prince seemed his normal, cheerful self, playing with his brother and sister without apparent concern, which provided Kate some measure of relief. William departed for Clarence's house at 9:30, allowing himself extra time to prepare mentally for the conversation ahead. The drive through London's streets gave him opportunity to organize his thoughts and clarify his priorities. Above all else, he needed to make his father understand that this was not about family drama or personal conflicts, but about protecting children from inappropriate behavior. The fact that Camilla held the title of Queen Consort did not exempt her from basic expectations of proper conduct, especially concerning vulnerable young family members. The king received William in his private study, a room lined with books and family photographs that normally felt warm and welcoming. Today, however, the atmosphere was decidedly tense. The king had already been briefed on the incident by his own staff. William knew there would be differences between the official report and whatever account Camilla had provided. His father looked tired, older than his years, clearly troubled by the situation that had developed between his wife and his son's family. William began by presenting the facts as clearly and objectively as possible. He recounted Kate's account of events, Captain Sterling's observations, and the statements from other witnesses who had been present. He emphasized that this was not a case of misunderstanding or overreaction, but rather a clear instance of Camilla attempting to remove Louis from his mother's care against Kate's explicit wishes. The physical nature of the attempt, with Camilla gripping the child's arm and pulling despite his cries, was particularly concerning. The king listened in heavy silence, his expression difficult to read. When William finished his account, there was a long pause before his father spoke. The king acknowledged that the situation was troubling and that Camilla's behavior had been inappropriate. However, he also suggested that perhaps the incident had been exaggerated in the retelling, that emotions had been running high, and that what seemed aggressive might have been merely insistent. William felt frustration rising but kept his voice level as he responded. William explained that multiple trained security personnel had assessed the situation as serious enough to intervene directly, something they would not do lightly given Camilla's position. Captain Sterling, a veteran guard with impeccable judgment and discretion, had physically positioned himself to prevent Camilla from leaving with Louis. That alone should indicate the severity of what had occurred. Furthermore, Louis himself had been crying and frightened. Clear evidence that this went beyond simple adult miscommunication. The conversation became increasingly difficult as the king seemed torn between supporting his son and defending his wife. He suggested that Camilla had perhaps simply been excited about giving Louis a gift and had not realized how her enthusiasm might be perceived. William countered that Kate had offered reasonable alternatives, suggesting staff retrieve the gift, and that Camilla's subsequent attempt to physically remove Louis, despite Kate's clear objections, went far beyond mere enthusiasm. It demonstrated either a troubling lack of judgment or a deliberate disregard for parental net. William then raised the question that had been troubling him since learning of the incident. Why had Camilla been so insistent on getting Louis alone and away from the palace? What about this supposed gift required Louis to accompany her to her car without his mother present? The more William thought about it, the less sense Camilla's stated reasoning made. It suggested either extremely poor judgment or possibly some other motivation that had not been openly stated. Either scenario was deeply concerning from a child protection perspective. The king appeared uncomfortable with this line of questioning, suggesting William was reading too much into what had been a simple misunderstanding. He urged his son not to transform a family incident into something more sinister than it had been. William felt his patience wearing thin. This was not about creating drama, but about acknowledging reality. His father seemed more concerned with protecting Camilla from consequences than addressing the legitimate concerns about her behavior toward his grandson. The discussion continued for over an hour. With William refusing to back down on his core position, he made it clear that going forward, Camilla would not have unsupervised access to any of his children. This was not a punishment, but a necessary precaution given that she had demonstrated an inability or unwillingness to respect boundaries set by the children's parents. The king objected strenuously to this condition, arguing it would create an untenable situation within the family and damage Camilla's relationship with her step-grandchildren. William remained firm, explaining that Kate and he had no desire to prevent Camilla from seeing the children during family gatherings or official events. However, the idea of Camilla taking any of their children anywhere without both parents present was no longer acceptable. Trust, once broken, needed to be rebuilt through consistent, appropriate behavior over time. If Camilla felt this was unfair, then perhaps she should have considered the consequences before attempting to forcibly remove a child from his mother's arms. The king attempted several different approaches to soften William's position. He suggested mandatory family counseling, promised to speak seriously with Camilla about proper boundaries, and even offered to arrange a formal apology. William appreciated these offers, but explained they did not change the fundamental reality. His children's safety and well-being could not be negotiated or compromised. He and Kate, as the children's parents, had every right to determine who had what level of access to their children, and that decision was not subject to override by anyone. Regardless of title or position, as the meeting drew toward its conclusion, the king made one final appeal to family unity and the importance of presenting a united front to the public. William acknowledged these concerns, but pointed out that true unity required trust and mutual respect. Camilla's actions had damaged that trust significantly. The family could weather this privately if everyone acted responsibly going forward. However, attempting to sweep the incident under the rug or minimize its significance would only create more problems down the line. The two men parted with tension still evident between them, though William hoped his father would eventually understand his position once emotions had cooled. The protection of children should transcend family politics and royal protocol. William felt confident he had handled the conversation as well as possible under difficult circumstances, though he remained troubled by his father's apparent unwillingness to fully acknowledge the seriousness of Camilla's behavior. Returning to Kensington Palace, William briefed Kate on the meeting. She had been anxiously awaiting news, worried about how the conversation might have gone and what it might mean for future family relationships. William's account confirmed her fears that the king had been more defensive of Camilla than supportive of their concerns. Kate felt disappointed but not surprised. The royal family had a long history of prioritizing institutional stability over addressing uncomfortable truths about individual behavior. Together, William and Kate discussed their path forward. They agreed that maintaining their position on supervised contact was essential, regardless of any family pressure to relent. They also recognized that this might mean reduced interaction with the king and Camilla for a period, something that would be difficult but necessary. Their primary obligation was to their children, and they would not compromise on that obligation to avoid family awkwardness or political complications. In the days following the meeting, life at Kensington Palace gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy. Louis continued to thrive, showing no signs of lasting trauma from the incident. Charlotte and George remained blissfully unaware of the adult tensions swirling around them. Kate and William maintained their public duties with characteristic professionalism, giving no outward sign of the family's strife occurring behind closed doors. However, those close to the family noticed subtle changes in dynamics and interactions. Captain Sterling submitted his formal report on the incident, which was filed with the Palace Security Archives. His account was clear, detailed, and unambiguous about what he had witnessed and the actions he had taken to protect Prince Louis. The report served as an official record that could not be disputed or revised, ensuring that the truth of what had occurred would be preserved. Regardless of how family members might later choose to characterize events, Sterling took no satisfaction in documenting such uncomfortable events. But his duty to accuracy and accountability outweighed any desire to protect people from the consequences of their own actions. The private secretary also prepared a comprehensive memorandum on the incident and its aftermath, documenting the steps taken by palace staff and the decisions made by the Prince and Princess of Wales. This memorandum was shared with relevant senior staff members to ensure everyone understood the current protocols regarding the Wales children and their interactions with various family members. The document carefully avoided inflammatory language while making crystal clear that Louis, Charlotte, and George were not to be left in the sole company of the Queen Consort under any circumstances. As the week progressed, it became clear that Camilla had her own perspective on events and was sharing it with those she felt would be sympathetic. Various pieces of gossip began filtering back to William and Kate through discreet channels, suggesting Camilla was portraying herself as the victim of overreaction and Kate as an overprotective mother who had blown a minor incident out of proportion. These characterizations frustrated Kate, but William counseled patience, knowing that time and consistent adherence to appropriate boundaries would ultimately demonstrate the necessity of their position. The king attempted to mediate by suggesting a family dinner where issues could be discussed and resolved. William politely declined, explaining that no productive conversation could occur until Camilla demonstrated genuine understanding of why her behavior had been inappropriate. A forced gathering would only create more tension and accomplish nothing constructive. The king was clearly disappointed by this response but did not push further, perhaps recognizing that his son's determination was not going to be shaken by social pressure. Kate found herself reflecting on the broader implications of the incident. She had spent years navigating the complex dynamics of royal family life, always striving to maintain harmony while staying true to her values as a wife and mother. This situation represented a line that could not be crossed, regardless of the awkwardness or family tension it created. No amount of protocol or tradition could justify compromising on the safety and appropriate treatment of her children. In standing firm on this principle, she felt she was setting an important precedent, not just for her own family, but potentially for how such situations should be handled within the institution more broadly. The incident also strengthened the bond between Kate and William as they navigated the challenging aftermath together. Their united front on the issue of their children's welfare demonstrated the strength of their partnership and their shared priorities. Whatever tensions existed with other family members, they faced them as a team, confident in their decisions and committed to protecting what mattered most to them. This solidarity would prove essential as they continued to navigate the complex landscape of family relationships in the weeks and months ahead. 3 weeks after the incident at Kensington Palace, the full weight of the situation's consequences began to manifest in ways both expected and surprising. The immediate crisis had passed, but the underlying tensions remained. creating an uncomfortable new reality for everyone involved. Royal family gatherings that had once been routine, if sometimes strained, now required careful planning and coordination. To manage the restrictions William and Kate had implemented regarding their children's interactions with Camilla, the first major test came with a scheduled state banquet, an event where attendance by senior royals was essentially mandatory. Kate prepared herself mentally for the evening, knowing she would need to maintain perfect composure while being in the same room as Camilla for the first time since the garden party incident. William had arranged for Louis to remain at Kensington Palace with trusted nannies, while Charlotte and George would attend briefly as part of their gradual introduction to royal duties. Kate felt grateful that at least Louis would be spared the awkwardness of the evening. The banquet proceeded with all the expected grandeur and formality. Dignitaries from across Europe filled the gilded staterooms, and the royal family performed their roles flawlessly for public consumption. However, those with keen observational skills might have noticed the careful distance maintained between the Prince and Princess of Wales and the Queen Consort. They occupied different sections of the room during the reception, and the usual family photographs featured strategic positioning to avoid placing them in close proximity. Camilla's behavior throughout the evening was notably subdued. Lacking her usual confidence and animation, she appeared uncomfortable, perhaps aware that many present knew of the incident through the palace staff network that inevitably spread such information.
Oh.
Despite all attempts at discretion, the king stayed close to his wife, a protective presence that spoke volumes about the strain the situation had placed on him as well. He caught William's eyes several times during the evening, expressions difficult to interpret passing between father and son. Kate handled the situation with characteristic grace, engaging warmly with guests and fulfilling her duties without any visible sign of the turmoil beneath the surface. She had long ago mastered the art of separating her public persona from her private concerns, a skill that served her well during this challenging period. However, close friends who knew her well could detect the slight tension in her shoulders and the extra effort behind her smiles. This was not the environment she had hoped to navigate as Princess of Wales, but she would not allow it to diminish her commitment to her role. In the weeks following the banquet, a routine established itself around the new reality of family relationships. Large family gatherings continued to occur for state occasions and holiday celebrations, but the casual, informal interactions that had previously characterized the extended family's relationships with the Wales children had effectively ended where Camilla was concerned. George and Charlotte, old enough to notice changes, asked their parents why they no longer visited Clarence's house without explanation. Kate and William explained simply that schedules had become busier. A truthful, if incomplete, answer that satisfied the children for now. Louis, remarkably resilient as young children often are, seemed to have processed the incident in his own way. He occasionally asked about grandmother Camilla, but showed no particular distress about seeing her less frequently. His world remained secure and happy within the close family unit of his parents and siblings, and the reduced contact with his step-grandmother apparently did not leave a noticeable void. William and Kate watched carefully for any signs of lasting psychological impact, but Louis's natural buoyancy seemed to have carried him through without significant harm. Behind the scenes, Captain Sterling and his security team had implemented enhanced protocols for all interactions involving the Wales children and various family members. These measures were subtle but effective, ensuring that the restrictions set by William and Kate could be enforced without creating obvious scenes or embarrassments at public events. The security team took their responsibilities seriously, understanding that protecting the children included protecting them from situations where boundaries might be violated, even by people whose position normally granted them considerable privilege and access. The private secretary's office at Kensington Palace found itself managing an increasingly complex web of scheduling and logistics designed to maintain appropriate boundaries while minimizing public attention to family tensions. Events were planned with careful attention to who would be present and what level of supervision would be required. Written protocols were established and shared among relevant staff members, ensuring consistency in how various situations would be handled. The institutional machinery of the royal household adapted to the new reality, as it had adapted to countless challenges throughout history. Meanwhile, the king continued to struggle with his position caught between his wife and his son's family. He made several more attempts to broker some kind of reconciliation, or at least a formal resolution that would allow for more normal family interactions. However, each attempt foundered on the same fundamental issue: William and Kate's unwillingness to compromise on supervised contact until they felt confident that Camilla truly understood and respected appropriate boundaries. The king found this stance frustrating, viewing it as unnecessarily rigid. But William remained unmoved by appeals to family harmony or institutional considerations. Camilla herself had largely withdrawn from attempting to interact with the Wales children at all, perhaps recognizing that any effort to do so would be closely monitored and potentially awkward for everyone involved. This withdrawal was noticed by others in the family and royal circle, though interpretations varied. Some viewed it as appropriate restraint and respect for the boundaries that had been set. Others saw it as petulant avoidance, an unwillingness to accept responsibility and work toward genuine reconciliation. The truth likely contained elements of both perspectives. Kate found herself in an unexpected position of quiet influence as other members of the extended family observed the situation and its handling. Several relatives privately expressed support for the stance she and William had taken, acknowledging that protecting children's welfare should indeed take precedence over family politics or institutional concerns. These quiet endorsements, while not changing the fundamental dynamics, provided Kate with validation that her maternal instincts and her insistence on appropriate boundaries were not overreactions, but rather proper responses to legitimate concerns. The incident also prompted broader conversations within the palace about protocols and procedures for protecting vulnerable family members, particularly children. While the royal family had extensive security measures in place to guard against external threats, the situation had revealed potential vulnerabilities in addressing inappropriate behavior from within the family itself. New guidelines were quietly developed, emphasizing that protection extended to ensuring appropriate interpersonal conduct, and that security personnel had both the authority and responsibility to intervene in situations where family members, regardless of rank, were acting inappropriately toward children. As summer approached, the Wales family retreated to their country residence for a period of relative privacy and normalcy. Away from the formal constraints of London and the constant awareness of public scrutiny, Kate and William could focus on their children and each other. The estate provided space for the children to play freely, and the reduced schedule of official duties allowed for lazy mornings and family meals. Without the pressure of constant engagements, Louis particularly thrived in this environment. His natural exuberance given full expression in the gardens and surrounding countryside. During one quiet evening, after the children had gone to bed, Kate and William sat together, reflecting on everything that had transpired since that morning at Kensington Palace. They discussed whether they had handled the situation correctly, whether there might have been better ways to navigate the challenges, and what the long-term implications might be for family relationships. Both acknowledged that the path they had chosen was difficult and had created significant tension, but neither regretted prioritizing their children's safety and well-being above other considerations. William expressed continued disappointment in his father's response to the situation, feeling that the king had failed to adequately support his position as a parent protecting his child. Kate, characteristically more forgiving, suggested that the king was in an impossibly difficult position and was doing his best to maintain relationships with both his wife and his son. This didn't excuse the inadequate response, but it provided context for understanding it. William appreciated Kate's perspective, though his own feelings remained complicated and somewhat hurt by what he perceived as his father choosing Camilla's comfort over his grandson's protection. As the weeks turned into months, the immediate intensity of the situation gradually faded into a new normal. Family events continued with their established protocols and boundaries. Camilla remained at a careful distance from the Wales children, interacting with them only in settings where others were present, and then only minimally. The king had apparently accepted that his hopes for a quick resolution were not going to be realized, and had settled into managing the situation as it existed rather than as he wished it to be. Kate occasionally wondered whether Camilla had genuine remorse for her actions, or whether she simply resented the consequences she was experiencing. The question mattered less than the practical reality that the boundaries being maintained were working as intended. Louis was thriving without any apparent negative impact from reduced contact with his step-grandmother. Charlotte and George were adjusting to the modified family dynamics without excessive questions or concerns. The family unit that Kate and William had built together remained strong and secure. Captain Sterling, in his quiet and professional way, took satisfaction in knowing that his intervention that morning on the Kensington Palace terrace had prevented what could have become a more serious situation. He had served the royal family long enough to understand that protecting them sometimes meant protecting them from threats they would prefer not to acknowledge. His actions had been correct and necessary, even though they had created discomfort for some very powerful people. That was the nature of true protection, doing what was needed rather than what was comfortable or politically expedient. The incident became part of the complex history of relationships within the contemporary royal family. A story known to those close to the family but carefully kept from public knowledge. Palace staff who had witnessed events understood the importance of discretion, and the formal reports remained sealed in confidential files. The outside world continued to see the carefully curated public image of family unity and harmony, unaware of the private tensions and boundaries that existed beneath the surface. For Kate, the experience reinforced lessons she had learned throughout her years in the royal family. Maintaining integrity and protecting what truly mattered sometimes required accepting conflict and tension rather than prioritizing superficial harmony. Her role as a mother was more fundamental than her role as Princess of Wales. And when those roles came into conflict, she would always choose her children. This clarity of priorities provided a foundation that would serve her well through whatever challenges the future might bring. Louis himself remained blissfully unaware of the lasting impact his experience had had on family dynamics. To him, the incident at the garden party was a frightening moment that had quickly passed, replaced by the security and love of his parents and the normal activities of his young life. He continued growing and thriving, surrounded by people who genuinely cared for his well-being and protected him even from threats he was too young to fully understand. In many ways, his resilience and recovery were the truest measure of success in how his parents had handled the situation. As autumn arrived and the royal calendar filled with its regular schedule of engagements and responsibilities, the Wales family had found their equilibrium within the new reality. They had weathered a crisis that could have caused lasting damage to their children or created unbridgeable rifts within the family. Instead, through careful boundary setting, unwavering commitment to their children's welfare, and the support of loyal staff like Captain Sterling, they had navigated a difficult situation with grace and determination. The path forward remained complex, but they walked it together, confident in their priorities and their love for each other and their children.